We've got very limited time. I would like for this to be as interactive as possible. I'm going to ask Ms. Belynda to start introducing herself. Ms. Belynda works with the Presidential Climate Change, so she will also give us a perspective on where we are as a country. As a South African, we find ourselves between a rock and a hard place in terms of energy transition. And we have a challenge to be seen to be leading the conversation, not only the conversation, but the implementation. Ms. Belynda will be joined by Dr. Matjila, as Sam had mentioned. So mine is just to facilitate the talk between these two experts. As also I mentioned, I would like for this to be as interactive as possible. Let us see how we can unlock opportunities around economic development as we implement. We have had a lot of talk in the past 2 years over COVID on webinars. My interest is how do we move forward? So without wasting time, let me start with you, Belynda. If you can introduce yourself, and then I'll give a chance to Dr. Matjila to also introduce himself, and then we'll come back to you to elaborate on what just transition means from a South African landscape. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Tshire, and morning everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation. I'm Belynda Petrie, as Tshire said. I actually work for an organization called OneWorld Sustainable Investments, and we have been subcontracted to the Presidential Climate Commission to support them in aspects of the just transition framework that they're developing and the community engagements and developing the strategy. So we'll talk a little bit about that today, among other aspects of the just transition. Thank you very much.
Dr. Matjila?
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Joseph Matjila. I'm from Exxaro Resources, a coal mining house here in South Africa. We'll talk about how we considering this just transition as part of our business going forward. Thank you.
Thanks. So Ms. Petrie, where are we in terms of the PCC? Where is South Africa?
All right, colleagues, the just transition process has been underway in South Africa actually for some years. In the beginning, whatever the beginning means, it was a process hosted by the National Planning Commission and planned for and implemented by the National Planning Commission, which sat in those days in the Department for Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation, which in turn is in the President's office. At the Job Summit in 2019, or was it 2018, there was a big job summit in South Africa, and at that point, and at the Job Summit, the Presidential Climate Commission was launched, and the Just Transition mandate then shifted from the Planning Commission to the Presidential Climate Commission. And that as an institution is now just over a year old. It was established about a year ago. It has a secretariat and about 20 commissioners. And the 20 commissioners represent different issues like labor, industry, environmental issues. So there's a spread of that kind of expertise among the commissioners. And the current program of work entails the development of a just transition framework for the country. And that just transition framework is what we are currently consulting stakeholders around the country on. I've just come back from South Durban Basin this week. Next week, we're going to Mokubetsi in the Eastern Cape, where there are some serious issues, very contentious issues around mining. In Durban South, it was very much around the issues of the refineries and the health impacts, massive health impacts that refineries have caused over decades. But also many of them are shutting down now. SAPREF, which is a joint venture between BP and Shell, are wanting to sell the refinery, and so it's a toss-up really in Durban South. Just to give an example of people that have faced serious health and safety issues as well, because there are continuous explosions in the petrochemical industry, but the health issues from poor air quality, very poor air quality, and leukemia in children. 45% of people have got asthma as a result. So the health issues are massive, and they're said to cost the economy about 30 billion rand a year in public health care. Not that money seems to be, that care seems to be reaching the people. So the trade-off in a place like Durban South, and there are plenty other examples, is do we want to keep our jobs in the refining industry, or do we want to have clean air and health and safety for our families? It's a very difficult choice to make, and of course the push is for clean technologies, to carry on refining oil but using much cleaner technologies. So I digressed a little bit because I think it's interesting to have some examples, but the consultation process in places like Durban South next week, as I said, we're going to Kolobeni, where we will address some of the mining issues there. We will be in Mpumalanga, where we're addressing the coal mining transition. We've got one of the mines with us today, which is great. It's very nice to meet you, Doc, if I may call you that. And then we'll be in Gqeberha to deal with the motor industry and the transition towards electric vehicles that's happening in the world, and what that then will do to the motor industry, either if we do go to electric vehicles or what happens if we don't. Will the motor industry collapse? There's a big question mark, and that's in Port Elizabeth alone, that's around 10,000 jobs. And if you multiply that by 4 to 5 people that are dependent on one salary in the motor industry, that's a lot of people in an economy that's pretty much built around the motor industry. So, and the examples go on. So the consultations in these various hotspot areas, and there are 8 that we are doing, will then feed into the Just Transition Framework that the Presidential Climate Commission is developing. And that Just Transition Framework in turn will set the policy for South Africa for implementing the Just Transition. And that framework is intended to indicate short to medium term policy interventions. Those policy interventions could be procedural. And there we're very much focused on, and people want this obviously, inclusivity in decision making. And Tshire, I said to you yesterday, and I want to say to the audience today, is that in my mind, a just transition is not just if it's not inclusive. A green economy is not a green economy if it's not inclusive in a place like South Africa. So that inclusivity is extremely uppermost on our minds. And the policy could also be distributive. So in other words, distributing resources through society. And I think part of your platform for today is, addressing small, medium enterprises, for example. And we believe there are significant opportunities for SMEs to take up the business opportunities that are created by the Just Transition. And interestingly, when we were in Durban South on Tuesday, this was a big message from some of the people, the stakeholders in the room, is that they feel that small business is the future. And to go back to that example in terms of cleaning up the air and cleaning up that environment, they'd rather the small business environment, the small business community would rather see the refineries go completely. And that they see that there are job opportunities that start from cleaning up the soil and the environment, restoring that area back to being a food basket for that area, which it used to be. There were market gardens in that, if you can believe. Anyone that's been to Durban South and seen that very dense industrial development that's gone on there. It's hard to believe that that once was a market garden area and feeding a good chunk of South Africa, including Gauteng. So that's where small business, it's an example of small business opportunities. And then a third way of considering justice and policy interventions is restorative. So there could be compensation, for example, for impacted groups. So let's say, for example, the refineries stay and the health issues continue that example in Durban South. Let's use that example that there could be reparations for the community to deal with the health issues. There could be money put into proper clinics and access to good public health for people that have been badly impacted, for example. So let me just perhaps end by saying that in this framework, we are trying to address, and you've probably already heard this, governance issues, so how to align divergent interests, how to leverage existing activities and capacity. For example, use of local and regional development agencies. We're looking at funding. How do you finance the just transition? How can SMEs, for example, access money to get their businesses started? Through the opportunities that are created by climate change, for example. We're also looking at the labor market. So what skills developments are needed to enable people to, say, transition from a coal job to a renewable energy job? What skills developments needs are there? What mechanisms are needed for small and local business development? Economic diversification is a huge consideration. So we're thinking about which sectors need to be targeted. How do we involve local and Black-owned businesses? What incentives are needed? How do we think about infrastructure? And then lastly, we're looking at social support. So that's a fourth dimension. And that's, for example, the reparation example that I used earlier. And there may, for example, need to be a period of income support as the transition happens. So there are a range of issues, as you can hear, it's fairly complex. But that, Tshire, is in a nutshell, it wasn't such a nutshell, but that's the process that we are busy with the Presidential Commission. I'd love an opportunity later, if it's possible, just to talk about some of the strategies and the opportunities, because I think that's really where this audience might benefit in terms of thinking about. But let me hand back to you. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Belynda. I think we would appreciate that. And I would like to come back to the job opportunities around this as we give Dr. Matjila a chance as well. Dr. Matjila, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks, Belynda, for quite a comprehensive overview of what the Presidential Commission is doing. And you touched on an area that I have an interest in, which is the work that was happening this week in the Durban South, where the old Durban airport used to be, actually, with amongst those refineries. It was in the news, actually. I caught a glimpse of it this week on the consultation that has been happening between the industry as well as the stakeholders, mainly the community that is impacted by the refineries. It's something that I used to be responsible for, so I'm declaring, Chair, that it's I have a conflict on that one. When I was still with the department responsible for air quality management, we had a particular project in that area, in the Durban South area. It was called the multi-point plan, which was meant to help us manage the impacts of the refineries on the host communities. And I saw Mr. Desmond Desai, I think, was on the news, who was speaking on behalf of that. It is an area that is still a concern. Refineries are part of the economic framework of this country. And so we need to, as part of the management to balance, the impacts of industry on the host community and in a sustainable manner, until we have an alternative solution for the refineries. The refineries are regrettably part of us. I think the challenge there is the proximity of the refineries with the settlements there. And if you listen to that conversation, it's the refineries have been growing and they're encroaching on communities. But the communities is the sense that the refineries will say, well, we've been here, the community has just been getting closer to us, but it is a real and present risk for us. Like you said, Belynda, these refineries have got the organic chemicals that are carcinogenic. It's a well-established fact. So there's a real risk, and there have been a few safety incidents that are impacting the local community. So it's a good and important step to look for a sustainable solution for this industry. It, in a way, it ushers us into the conversation that we have been having here at Exxaro. As I indicated, I work for a mining house. We mine coal. We supply coal to Eskom. So we take this at multiple levels. This conversation of climate change, which is a real issue that us as a developing country have to look at in a practical and sustainable manner. The first aspect that we all embrace this journey of the just transition, that part of our destiny is to move our economies to be less and less dependent on fossil fuel type of energies, which we are in the business of. But we have to do this in a responsible manner. The first aspect that has to be put on the table, not just for us as a coal mining company, but as a broader mining industry issue, is that mining is a significant employer. Mining carries a large number of jobs. And if you then transition your business or your economy from the dependence on fossil fuel, you have to be reasonable in migrating the jobs from mining. In fact, if you look at the trends in the mining industry, it's been from hard rock mining to coal mining. That's where the employment is. So as we consider the journey that we reduce our dependence on mining coal and burning coal, we have to have a plan of not only sustaining the jobs that are there, but transitioning them in a responsible manner. So that's the first challenge that we have to do. The second part of this challenge is, and there's an opportunity because of the type of know-how that's already there in mining. Mining by nature is a finite business. So as part of the planning of mining activities, we are considering that inevitable day where mining has to cease. And as we then exit such operations, you then have to place these jobs in other economic activities that are not mining. And there's an opportunity for us to look at alternative employment in the green economy, the type of economy that we think is the future. So that's the first point that I just want to make, Chair, is the need for a just process to sustain the jobs that we have. But not only that, we as an economy are playing with a high unemployment rate. So it is not enough to only limit our thought process to the existing jobs, but there's an opportunity for us to create more jobs that are not mining related. That's the first point that I wanted to make. The second point is the opportunities that lies in the mining sector. Mining by nature holds vast tracts of land. we hold, I mean, any mining house, you'd see there will be a land management or estate management type of portfolio. We hold land as part of the mining process, and we keep this land as we mine, and we have an opportunity during the mining phase to look at other economic use of such land. And I'll give you an example of what we have been doing as a company, but it is an opportunity for us to start thinking on how you open up this opportunity through meaningful engagement, like what Belynda has just said, to look at partnerships to optimize this land. In our flagship operation in Limpopo, we run a game reserve, quite a successful game reserve. Because as part of the mining of Grootegeluk mine, we have been holding onto land that is actually in an area that could be used for conservation. We have run that successfully, so with quite innovative opportunities actually that we saw. A good one is that we have a good population of rhinos. And because of that and the other species that we've actually been running a successful game farm with the ancillary economic activities that are associated with running a game farm. We've used it as part of our broader rhino conservation program, which in our view is quite a good project where mining, like Belynda, will digress a bit, but I think it's something that I just want to put on the table so that you understand if you think differently around these opportunities, you can use them. Mm-hmm. So we have a healthy population of rhinos and we are in South Africa. Across the border in Botswana, we have our other counterpart, which is the BS Botswana, Botswana. They are also running a presidential rhino conservation program. Mm-hmm. And we, through the Game Rangers Association, struck an agreement with Botswana, to take a population of our rhinos into Botswana so that we can improve. One of their challenges is the gene pool of their rhinos because they had a smaller population. So we took our rhinos, applied for a CITES permit through the ICUN, and transferred them on loan to Botswana, which in a way is a good strategy now because we can strengthen the population of the rhinos in Botswana, which is a broader opportunity for us to combat the impact that we have of rhino poaching. Just to give you an example, successful program where we have, as a mining house, used the land to run a game farm, which is now having an opportunity for us to support the broader national objective of protecting an endangered species. We are in June actually having a collaboration with Mozambique, the Kruger National Transfrontier Park, where we are taking excess animals, including the rhinos that we have, and donating them to the Kruger National Park site of Mozambique to enhance the Kruger National Park, population of animals, including rhinos. I'm giving you a sense of, if you then look at mining with a set of eyes that are innovative, you can use the resources to leverage those to create another economic activity. Okay. I just given you something on conservation, but as we hold on to land, and we're doing that now currently in Exxaro to look at, can we use this land, particularly when you're doing, for example, your underground mining, so you don't really use the land that much except for accessing the reserves underground, to support agricultural activity. So there is a program within the organization to look at supporting agriculture. In fact, small-scale farmers by giving them access to land and providing some additional resources to create alternative economic activity beyond mining. So there is another opportunity as we mine to start transitioning or opening up other economic activities that are not mining. And as part of our transitioning now, we are in other activities. Part of our assets is a renewable energy business. So we have a sizable business in the Eastern Cape that are in the wind farm space. And we are now connected to the grid and providing energy to the grid. In my mind, that sort of gives you examples of how a mining house like us can use and think about its business that allows us to, in a just manner, transition from the core business of mining to another economic activity that we're doing currently as we mine. But that opportunity also presents itself when you close mining, which is something that, as I indicated, is inevitable. That you position the remaining assets to open up economic activity. So we have such in Exxaro. In KZN, we long closed some of our operations in Danhauser and Vryheid. So in Danhauser, we run a successful cattle farm, which is quite sustainable. And in fact, it's a breeding species that we sell onto other farmers just because of the type of quality of animals that we have at the farm. In Slovan, the old mined out areas have actually been converted to forestry. So we run silviculture, successful silviculture. And for us, it is another demonstration on how you can integrate other economic activity with your mining business that allows you to move into this economic activity during the mining and even post mining. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Thanks, Doc. That is very comprehensive. And what I like about this platform is to present an opportunity for private sector to present these type of projects because we are not aware of them.